Hello and welcome. I'm Rosemary Pena, President of the Black German Heritage and Research Association, and Adjunct Professor of German Studies at the University of British Columbia at Vancouver. Our conversation on this Martin Luther King's Memorial Day represents the 22nd event in the BGHRA's All Black Lives Matter series. My colleague, Angelica Fenner, and I are delighted to host Olivia Wenzel as our special guest this morning, and we are grateful for Jamel Watkins, who will moderate today's discussion. But before we commence, I'll ask Angelica if she would also like to say a few introductory words, and then be so kind as to turn the program over to our discussants, Olivia Wenzel and Jamel Watkins. Angelica?
Thank you, Rosemary. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you're currently located on this spinning planet of ours. Here in Toronto, we just woke up this morning to literally 2 feet of snow that fell overnight, and it's still falling. So you may possibly hear a bit of noise from snowblowers in the background here outdoors, but I'm going to be muted as much as I can be. And at the moment, it's actually quite quiet. Thank you, Rosemary, for the introduction and for explaining the circumstances of this collaboration. I'm going to begin actually by first acknowledging that the land on which I work here at the University of Toronto and the larger city in which I also reside is located on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, this region is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and I, as a settler to this region and a participant in the local ecology, strive to labor, to learn, and to thrive in a sustainable fashion. So today's conversation is the second in an online speaker series titled East Germans: Reclaiming Black Identities Through Cultural Activism, that has been made possible through a generous grant from the Waterloo Center for German Studies under the leadership of Dr. James Skidmore, with infrastructural support from Rutgers University Camden and the University of Toronto. So whenever we speak about East Germany, we understand ourselves to be referencing a state that no longer exists as a political entity, having in 1990 undergone unification with the Federal Republic of Germany. Yet many current citizens and residents of the Eastern Länder or states retain a memory of their socialization within political institutions and within cultural and subcultural networks that have been formative of their identities in ways variously enabling but also challenging. Across the past decade, we've witnessed in Germany's public sphere a continuing, even growing cognizance of the lingering effects that these memories have in also shaping members of those generations that were socialized within East Germany and contended in their formative years of their biographies, whether this was childhood, adolescence, or early adulthood, with the dramatic upheavals attending the GDR's dissolution and the ensuing national unification process. Our speaker series directs attention most especially to those individuals whose intersectional identities complicate prevalent assumptions about East Germany as comprised of a homogeneous white population. These assumptions are gradually recalibrating as Germany's colonial past and the East German socialist internationalism find their way into historical accounts and public discourse. These inscriptions are gaining a certain urgency in the presence of international contract workers, political immigrants, asylum seekers, people of color, and students who were once long ago invited to East Germany to work and study. Both as individuals and as groups, they've left their mark on East German culture and society and are ongoing participants in the writing of the Wende. They, and now their families and descendants, continue to shape East Germany's legacy. So as part of today's speaker, our featured artist, we're very fortunate to have with us today Professor Jamel Watkins. Dr. Watkins is an assistant professor at the University of Minnesota, whose researches are located at the intersection of Black and African diaspora studies, performance, and German studies. Dr. Watkins will formally introduce our second guest artist, Olivia Wenzel, for the lively conversation to ensue. The floor is yours, Jamel.
Thank you so much, Angelica. I do also want to start out by saying I work and live on Dakota and Ojibwe land, and I'm grateful for the stewards of the land here and affirm tribal sovereignty over this land by them in the past and for the future. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce Olivia Wenzel. Olivia Wenzel was born in Weimar, Germany, and now lives in Berlin, and is the author of the novel Tausend Turpentinen Angst, came out in 2020. Several of her dramatic works, such as Mais in Deutschland and Andere Galaxien und Jiggy Porsche taucht ab, have been staged at the Münchner Kammerspiele in Munich, the Thalia Theater in Hamburg, and the Deutsches Theater in Ballhaus-Nanienstraße in Berlin. Wenzel also works as a musician and performer, collaborating with multidisciplinary theater collectives such as Vorschlag, Hammer, und Schatter. In 2022, Olivia will lead a series of multidisciplinary workshops with young adults of color at the Haus der Kulturen der Welt in Berlin. So please, Olivia, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction and thank you for the invitation. I just noticed that my earrings are not visible and then invisible again. Blurry. So it's nice to be here. It's getting slowly dark outside where I am. I live in Berlin. And today I brought you 2 excerpts of my novel. And this novel, Priscilla Lane is translating it. And it will come out in July at Catapult. And I also brought you a short video that we could watch together later. And I think it might be good maybe because probably the people who watch us today don't know my book, if I just read for 5 minutes and then we can start the conversation. Yes? Cool. All right. So I printed out some pages of the script that is still getting copy edited, etc. So it's not fixed yet, but it's really nice for me to read out of it, but it's also quite challenging because of course my mother language, my mother tongue is German, so pardon me if I make mistakes. And I will start reading something that is very early on, where the protagonist, a young Black woman that was born in the former GDR, is traveling a bit and starts reflecting upon her family. I come from a family for whom travel was always an unfulfilled longing, but not in the sense of a lone wolf. Rather, what does that mean? It means go on, go on. It means, picture this. My mother, a young woman with blue hair and a studded belt, a punk stuck in East Germany. A young woman who gets involved with an Angolan in a small East German town where everyone knows one another. A young woman who wishes to get away, who longs excessively for her immigration permit to be approved shortly after the African had to return to his country. A young woman who imagines them having a life together in Angola, a life under a different sun, with different mentalities, a life of freedom. But then, at age 19, a few months after giving birth to twins, an arrest, her immigration permit is revoked, her psyche crumbled like a cookie in a Stasi prison. Is this the pitch for the next cliched East German movie on public television? The problem with cliches is not that they're not true. Rather, they're often true. The problem is that they only ever describe the same single perspective. So what? Picture this. My mother, a woman who is raising me and my twin brother as best as she can, and is as if we're to blame for her life, to blame for the reason she never got out of this damn fucking country, which is what she used to call East and then West Germany, whether before German reunification or after it. She always had to stay behind. Her man got himself a new family in Angola since his old one didn't follow him back then. Besides this, always too little money, always alone. Oh, but she had you kids, no? My mother today, a 53-year-old woman who's never been able to get over the many times she was imprisoned or the violent death of her son, a woman who has herself institutionalized and pronounces me dead, a wounded animal who's been forced into a corner her entire life and bears her teeth. Rabies. What? Ah, you can already die 15 days after being infected. Have you been vaccinated? Against what? Everything that could be harmful to you. This scar, this small relief-like abrasion on my mother's upper arm, and so many of those who were born in East Germany, it fascinated me as a child. I thought it was a miniature map of a secret, wonderful land. Weird. Does that mean that you don't keep in touch? She refuses to. The last time I saw her was at the funeral. In what institution is she now? I don't know. And your brother? What about him? How did he lose his life? Lose his life, lost track of his life? And your other relatives? My father writes an email from Angola twice a year. One email always comes a day before our birthday. Now it's just my birthday. He can't remember the correct date. And your grandparents? My grandfather is dead, cancer. My grandmother is still alive. Where is she now? Probably at home in front of the television or at the doctor. Why so dismissive? Picture this. My grandmother, a loyal supporter of the Socialist Unity Party and a proud mother of 2 daughters, proud in general and often, because of her good connections, she always got nylon, pantyhose and jeans, chocolate from West Germany and a beach rental on the Baltic. Proud because of her pretty blonde hair, teased high, proud of her striking beauty, her above average intelligence, proud of the beauty and intelligence of her daughters. My grandmother, a vain teenager who longs for nothing more than to be a stewardess, to combine business with pleasure, to travel all over the world, to get away without really being gone, because of course the GDR is my home, I don't really want to leave. Become a stewardess to escape her abusive father. Become a stewardess to see and to be more than the dumb people in her small town. Become a stewardess to experience what flying feels like. But then she never became a stewardess, but pregnant instead and later on a secretary. At age 40, disabled with back pain, since then unemployable. So much failure on your maternal line. Excuse me, is your family A, cursed, B, just very unlucky, C, mentally ill, or D, pretty solid regarding the circumstances? My grandmother today, a cute, plump woman about age 70 who has fear of flying and can't even get on an elevator, a woman who loves the warmth of her heating pad, a woman who still dreams now and then of flying and who cannot speak openly with me, her easily irritable granddaughter, certainly not about the other grandchild, the boy who took his own life. Why can't she talk to you about it? Is there something you're afraid to divulge? No, nothing. Did you know that divulge originally didn't just mean to make public, but also to scatter abroad? No. And did you know the root word of divulge is vulgas, the same root as for vulgar? No. Do you travel so much so you won't divulge your secrets? All the men in my family are either dead or far away, and the women left behind are damaged, each in their own way. But I can travel as often and far as I want, even though it was never important to me, even though I never had to work for it. I was just born in the right place at the right time. I can even think about traveling for vacation. And while I travel, I can think about the self-determined, pleasant experience I'm having, while thousands of other people are forced to travel, people for whom words like crisis, wave and influx. Are you stop? That's a different topic altogether. Concentrate. Traveling is the subject, loneliness a side effect. What else? Why loneliness? Why are you chewing your nails? When we were kids, our mother sometimes went on vacation without us. Once she went to French Guiana and Suriname for 2 whole months. My grandfather was in the hospital at the time. As a consequence, my grandmother's life fell apart. That's why Melanie, a friend of our mother's, looked after us. Sometimes Melanie's partner, a moderate neo-Nazi, was there too. When it was time for dinner, he liked to call my brother and me to the table. Loudly, he'd yell through the apartment that us coffee beans should finally come to the kitchen. When our mother came back from vacation, for the first time ever, her nails were not chewed off. The cuticles were not damaged. That's how great her time abroad was. And so she did travel after all. Where to exactly? Afterwards, she was always sad for days that she had to return to Germany. And you? Me. Until here for now. Yeah, so this was from the first part of the novel. The novel has 3 parts. And in the first part, it's very strong, this conversation that the narrator has with different voices who really force her to tell different stories. And then the other parts, the second part is a bit calmer. And then there's a third part, and you might, if we have time, I might read something else later. Should I go on and speak about this?
Sure. Did you want to read the second passage, or should we go right to questions? What do you think? I know too, you also said you might have some visuals, but I'm happy to ask questions.
Yeah, maybe we talk for a bit and then later I read another part.
Sure, sure. I, of course, know your theater work, Mayas in Deutschland and Adam and Galaxien, and I see a lot of parallels between the play and this work. And I was really interested in the figure of the mother, and this white East German mother and this Black German child. And if you could maybe talk about maybe the evolution, or maybe what May's brought out of you in order to develop these other characters. I would be really interested in hearing, just how you developed that or wanted to continue a story like that.
Yeah, the Mais in Deutschland und anderen Galaxien is a play that I wrote, I think in 2014. It was staged in 2015 in the Ballhaus Naunienstraße. And to me, that was very important because this was the first time ever that I wrote a play that had, where the whole cast was not white in my imagination. And up till then, I had written quite a lot of pieces, theater pieces, and then I took part in a huge workshop, and it was organized by Sascha Mariana Salzmann and Dennis Utlu, who had been quite active in this post-migrantische theater scene already for years. And I would say this, with this play, something that before I had rejected started to really get a hold of me. And that means to, also politisierung, how do you say that in English?
Politicization, you could say.
Yeah, politicization, yes. Because I had up until this point, I did not even notice that everything I wrote, I imagined white people, which is not a problem, but to not know it, that is the problem, and to do it unconsciously. And then I wrote this piece, and it already had some parts that are close, very nearby to the stories of my family. I mean, the main protagonist, the white mother, is even called Susanna in both in the play and in the book later. And I think I juggled and I tried out to I started writing closer to me. I did not make up funny stuff that what I had, because this I had done for quite a while, where like people go into a supermarket and then they buy some crap, and then all of a sudden it's clear they will never die, and then they have to deal with this. I had stuff like this going on before, and I really enjoyed it, but there was never the politicization in it. So yeah, and this changed through this piece. And looking back now, I would say that the theater play was kind of ein Vorarbeit. Sorry, how do you say that? What is the, like a work of preparation for the book, kind of a build-up, which I did not know back at the time. And to me, it's quite natural to write in a dialogical structure. I really enjoy that, and I think I could bring it in. Yeah, this is where it comes from, because I had written pieces, theater pieces a lot. Yes. So, but for your question, this was the evolution, the role of the white mother with the black child. I think there are not so many parts where this is explicitly taken a closer look on. But there's a weird similarity between these two characters, that this white mother shows her Randständigkeit. Sorry, how do you say that? That she marginalization, yes, that she chose this kind of by herself on her own terms, meaning she chose to be a punk, etc. But the daughter has another level of marginalization, and there is also in this family, you see this in the book, but also in the play, there's a sort of racism that works in the family at play that is quite tricky to get a hold on. It's quite tricky to narrow down, and especially when it comes to the white grandmother, who absolutely loves her granddaughter in the book, but also continuously says things that are hurting for the black grandchild. So I think there are some elements of this where you see that the relation is quite fragile, and quite often very even toxic, and this narrator is really trying to navigate around all of this. These are the coils in the title. Serpentine is when you go up a hill and you go down, but you go in circles. So meaning you take a lot of detours, and this is also the emotional state that this narrator, she always takes detours, and she gets asked a lot of questions, but sometimes she just chooses to not answer them and takes a detour again, until a certain point where this does not work anymore, where she really has to confront the questions and even be stronger than the voices who question her. I hope I achieved that in the third part of the book, yes.
Yeah, speaking of these detours, I found time and space to be so interesting. Again, the last work, thinking about Mies and how time and space, function so in an interesting way, where you're in East Germany, but you're also like in outer space, and there's so many different places within the play. And thinking about your book, there's so many places too in that short passage that you read, and time is so fluid. And so I'd love to hear about how you are conceptualizing time and space in your head, how you make these detours and make them make sense, because I know I couldn't try to begin to write something and have it then make sense at the end. But yeah, I'd love to hear about maybe not just your approach to it, but how you see time and space function in the novel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the skeleton of the structure, that there are always questions and then there come answers to it that maybe are directly answering or leading somewhere else. This allows me, or this gives me a lot of freedom, and it allows me to really jump in between very different places and times, and even to jump in between memories or things that actually happen. And you also so you always have this layer of this artificial conversation that is like the live conversation, but it always moves back and forth in time. And I really like this because I can then, through the structure, write in an associative way. So the dramaturgy of that underlies it is rather associative than plot driven. It's not, of course, it's not chronologic, but it's rather, okay, there's at some point, for example, in the middle of the book, the narrator starts thinking about nails, fingernails, and then there goes a whole circle and it comes to, back then when the brother died, his nails seemed so long. And then it goes, at some point it goes to, and now she's pregnant, her nails grow faster than ever, but also when she was younger, she bite her nails like her mother did. And so I have this tiny object, the fingernail, and then I can move around it in an associative way and can also bend time and space around it, which is, for me, it's really nice to do it. And to me, when I wrote it, it felt very detailed and very like, more like when I do music, putting different bits together and seeing how also they sound together. But what the weird thing is when people read it, sometimes it happens to them that they read it in a very, in a rush. It's really fast then. And then this can, I think, give you even more the impression that the concept of time and space that you're used to is kind of fucked up in here. In a good way, maybe. No, but also in a bad way for some people. I mean, I love this book and it was very important to write, but I also absolutely understand if people don't find their way in it, because it's also the way it's written with all these questions. These questions mostly are in capitals. So you have also, it's quite aggressive from what you see on the page. And you can either really get sucked into it or you stay out. This is also often the case. So. And I could not see that coming, but I absolutely understand it. Yeah.
It sounds kind of like stream of consciousness, would you say, these detours, or would you?
Yeah, I'd say in parts, absolutely. But I think the main thing is this weird conversation with the voices, but also, of course, with oneself that the narrator does. There's the word Zwiegespräch that I cannot translate. So that's kind of that. It's also a weird questioning of oneself, maybe in a sort of a stream of consciousness, but also in a very intrusive way somehow.
Awesome. Okay, I know Angelica also had a couple of questions. I want to pass it off to you, Angelica.
Sure. Thank you, Olivia. This has been just really fascinating hearing your take on your book. And I just want to start out by thanking you for writing it. I really enjoyed it tremendously, and I'm very grateful to have been introduced to it. And I had a difficult time not reading it, devouring it, so to speak. It made me think about your metaphor of the snack machine and how I had to consciously pace myself in reading it, because I realized that if I devoured it too quickly, I wouldn't be able to savor the individual insights that it was enabling, but also it's that experience that you have, some or many people can probably relate to, where you are enjoying a book so much you don't want it to end, so you don't want to read it too quickly, because then you'll have to confront the end of it, and then that you have to leave that world that it is creating. So in any case, you've talked a bit about this, or through talking about the structure of the novel, you've basically been acknowledging this change in the shift in genre from working as a playwright to this debut as your first novel. And I had been thinking about, I guess one of the things I wanted to ask is what inspired the change in format, the desire to reach for the genre of the novel. And you've answered that question in a way through this explanation about what you can achieve through sort of overcoming time and space in the novel form. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of artistic process of changing gears from playwriting to novel? What made you reach for that? What are some of the challenges in working in that mode rather than as a playwright, and how you grappled with that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it was, oh, this is cheesy, but I think it chose me more than I chose it. Because I keep producing constantly either some sound stuff or some texts, but quite often at the beginning, I'm not sure what these things are. And then sometimes outside eyes come in and then they help me navigate towards something. And in this case, it was, I was back then, Priscilla Lane invited me in 2016 to the US, and I talked about a play that I had written, but this was also the time that Trump was elected, and I was there, especially at this time, for the first time really in the US as a grown-up person, and that was a very intense time for me. I saw a lot of devastated people. I felt like, okay, I'm here to talk about my play, but it's kind of not really the topic right now. And then I wrote, and then I randomly met Ta-Nehisi Coates very briefly. And then I read his book, Between the World and Me, and I had never read anything auto-fictional until then. And this, in this very moment of the election, this was very touching and very, yeah, it moved me. And it was really a huge inspiration to also dig deeper into my own stories and the stories around me, rather than just inventing stuff like I had done. But this did not immediately force me to change the format. I wrote then 7 or 8 pages with this questionnaire style that, of course, I also had to undergo to just come into the US. You know, these questionnaires: how much money do you carry? How do you have food with you? These absurd things. Are you in a terrorist organization? All these things. And then I mixed this up with other questions, and all of a sudden I had a format that I was interested in. I thought maybe this might be something that I could turn into sound. Maybe I will record this somehow and then play around with it. And then I sent it to different people, and they also sent it to other people. And at the end, I also was invited to several festivals. People said, could you imagine doing a 50 minutes performance with this? Could you produce more? And then I met, then the big agent publishing houses came and were like, could you also imagine to really take your time and see how far this format can carry you and can carry a reader? And then they gave me the idea that this could be a book. I did not think so when I started writing it in this way. And then to me, it is not important that there's a written novel on it or whatever format, but to have the time to go deep and to really have like 2 or 3 years to work on one thing. I mean, of course, I did other stuff I wrote plays, I need to hustle, everyone does, but to really take time for one thing, that was the biggest change. And that was for me very, yeah, it was very painful to write this, but also very relieving. And before this, when I had written plays, especially for other theaters, so sometimes they would give you the content to write about, then it was maybe 2 to 4 months or something. It was really fast. And with this, I could breathe a lot longer and could chew a lot longer on stuff, and of course research a lot of stuff. And then I also, because I don't love it to be alone in all of this, I come from theater, I work as a performer, I really like collective working. So at some point I was like, okay, I invite people, they have read what I've got until here, they sit together, I cook a soup, and then they speak about what they've read, and they have to pretend that I'm not there, and I can just listen, and then I can continue and go back to the Schreibtisch, to my desktop, to my desk. So I tried to make this process as nice as I could, but it was very lonely. And this is to me the biggest change, or the biggest challenge in writing something where most of the time it's just you and the voices you invent, but not people that you really can see and touch.
Thank you. Building on what you've elaborated there with regard to the structure of the novel, what you refer to as a dialogical structure, I want to pick up on, I know I'm looking in the chat, someone is also inquiring about that. And this, you've used different types of script to identify the different voices in this sort of polyvocal novel. So you have the first person narrative of the protagonist, and then you have the cursive script, which is usually, I guess, the dialogue of other people that are co-present. And then you have the, in capital letters, this other entity. And I sometimes, I mean, I'm sure all readers sort of ponder throughout the novel, you know, who is this figure? How are we to understand their role? It's very evocative, and I found it very effective. And it's interesting how it seems to sort of oscillate between a tone that makes one think this is like a therapist who's trying to help the protagonist understand her own life, or her, you know, the challenges she encounters and her own thought processes. And then at other times, it's sort of a moralizing, reproaching tone, as if it was this alter ego or, you know, super ego. And then at other times, it's almost like the voice of God, you know, this sort of, using the capital letters often is associated with shouting, or with a sort of very imperative, authoritative tone. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that use of the capital letters and of that entity.
Yeah, that in the very beginning, I tried to mark out different entities. They had like names like X and Z and blah, and then you saw, okay, this is the person who's maybe kind of supporting in a therapeutic way. This might be text from a chat that this narrator has with a friend, or even a conversation with a friend who's also supporting. Or then you have maybe the voice that is like, how do you say, Verhör?
And in
English?
an interrogation or interrogatory.
Yes, like then there quite often there's this interrogation voice, and then sometimes you have this weird voice. I would not have thought about God yet, but this very weird voice that is so so above all of it, and sometimes so exaggerating in their comments, like shouting like slave trade is the best market system there is, most effective stuff, very weird stuff like this that could even be read as cynical. And I think these are also very different voices that all of us encounter, no, all the time. I mean, there are people who can ask good questions and helpful questions, and then there are a lot of questions that I don't want to be asked again and again, or that where the question reveals so much more about the people who ask the question than it is actually in the question. Like the simplest thing is in the book, there's this passage, and it's like the questioner is, "Wo kommst du her? Where do you come from?" And the narrator says, "I'm coming from." "Where do you come from?" And it always repeats and interrupts, and there's no chance to answer this. So I played around with these weird forms of questions. Also, like when it comes to the topic of racism, quite uncomfortable questions sometimes, then maybe people who never thought about racism yet would ask, or maybe questions that also I would ask myself. And when I then found that mixing all of this, so you don't know who's asking it, works best, I did that. But so I don't have the clear answer here. Who is this weird an entity who's asking? I think it's a lot of voices, a lot of opinions, and ways to think about and reflect upon our world united in one, and that makes it so ambiguous. Yeah, but at the end, when people say, okay, but now really, who are these voices? Then I'm like, to me, I see a weird robot. I see a very weird robot asking these questions. To me, it's not like the twin of the narrator, but a robot is not the smartest answer.
Perhaps it's really the automated snack machine. I actually that
Yeah,
thought at some point.
I saw it. I mean, they adapted the book here for in different cities and show it on stage. And I saw one show where they really have the huge snack machine on stage, and it always spits out tiny dias. So, and then the actresses and actors take them, and then they start acting upon them. So this machine gives all the frame, and somehow to me that felt right, even though it's kind of to one-on-one. Yeah.
So I'm going to pass the next question to Jamel, back to Jamel, and we can all come back to this, of course, but just to bring another interlocutor in.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the Q&A here, and I want to maybe, since we're on the subject of like interlocutors, Sarah Colvin asked if you were in any way inspired by Claudia Rankine's You voice. And so maybe we can think, and then also the question above it thinks about Du Bois and double consciousness. So maybe you can share more about your inspiration to it. You said you read Teju Cole's book, and that really struck you. Or there are other books that inspired you in this sort of form of writing?
At the time, I read Citizen from Claudia Rankine, and I really enjoyed it. And then also I saw her giving a talk here, and she also showed a lot of images there. And this is also something I normally do. We don't do it today because it's recorded, and then I have to pay licenses, and I can't. But normally I really like to work with images, and this is also something Claudia Rankine does a lot, and I felt inspired to do that. Also, I read some Berger. Where is he? Jon Berger. I think he's also quoted in the book, who really thinks a lot about the regime of our looks, how we look onto things, and how through that we create them, or it's a complex topic. So I really enjoyed that. Read it. I read a bit of Teju Cole in this time, and Bell Hooks, All About Love. I really enjoyed this, and to me it is it's always amazing to get all of this input, but at the end of the day I'm also like it's also weird to only get all the inspiration for my work here in Germany from like all these Afro-American people who, of course, their context I can relate to, but it's still different. And that, I mean, and then as I collected images, I have an archive now of a lot of pictures from people of color, like from 17th century or stuff like this. So I collected a lot of images on social media, but also like in libraries. I scanned stuff, and as I did this, I noticed I really try to decolonize the way I'm used to seeing things, or I'm used to, or also to fill the lack of images I haven't seen yet. And this is what I try when I bring images, so like my video today. But as I did this, I also noticed, okay, I need to look wider. I cannot only always take stuff out from the US. I also look what's going on in Brazil. What do the photographers do there and stuff like this. So with the images, of course it's easier, but yeah. So but these were my inspirations, I'd say. And yeah, Helen, and maybe I can give this later on too. I can maybe put, when it's published, I can send some links to some photographers. Then cool. Yeah. So maybe I'm allowed now to show my video. Yeah. I try to build a bridge there because I really like this video. We shot this together with Philipp Rühr and Andrieux, who are two dear friends of mine and filmmakers. And I never had done something with movies yet. And then it was after I finished the book. And in Germany, there's this weird tradition of a book trailer that the PR, the publishing house does. And mostly these are crap, and it's really a lot of money for nothing. And always you see the author reading from his book, and that's it. And yeah, so I asked my publishing house, could you maybe give me the money you would use for this? And then I could do my own video. And they gave us some money, and then other people jumped in. And then we cast on the streets. We met a lot of young people, and we were like, hey, we want to do this music video. Would you, we never said it's for a book. And then I tell you all about this, I will show you later. But to me, this was again, the time I could free myself from being alone, and again, work around with a lot of people in a collective way after I'd written this, but still with the context and within the context of my book. And then the most beautiful moment with my book for myself was then when all these people of color were then in my living room, and we told them about the script. And then I read something to them from the novel that was not published yet. And I mean, now it's Corona, it's unthinkable to do something like this now. But I really enjoyed this moment. And as I started the book, I would not have thought about a moment like this. But yeah, so this was really wonderful, and shooting it was nice. And I will show it to you now. So this is my screen. You can see it now. Do you? Can you already see my screen? Yes. Good. Then I go to the VLC player. And I will, maybe you also, yeah, you're already muted, so you can hear the audio too. Yes, until there.
Wow, that was a very rich video with lots of different colors. And I don't know if you want to spend time talking a little bit more about your choices around the symbolism or around the colors and the extreme close-ups and the dancing, or if there's still also questions in the Q&A. So I want to give you the option of
Yeah. Maybe I want to say one thing about this video, and then
Yeah.
we can continue with the questions. I think I also showed this video because how to put this. So, I mean, what you see is like different versions of eyes, eyeballs, like as the balloons or as chewing gum or as, I don't know, as something in the water. And the basic idea behind this was like these people that are always confronted with these eyes staring at them. we chose a silly way of showing this, of depicting this. At some point, they collect all these eyes and they shove them into the sand. And then later on, the other protagonist, who might be the protagonist of my novel, because she's also there with a brother that might be dead, and takes out of the sand, and it's not these eyes anymore. It's the cookie, the fortune cookie, and in there is the book title. And the idea was how to create. How to aestheticize your own struggles and trauma and whatever, and create something out of it that might be nice. That might be a black fortune cookie. Now, so of course it's metaphors. Yeah, it's a music video, but this question is quite important to me, because sometimes I was really wondering as I wrote this, what am I doing here? I use so much of my own story, but who am I giving this to? And for example, now we have this talk and this situation here, but mostly in Germany. I'm in very white rooms in Literaturhäusern, meaning I quite often with the book I find myself in situations now where I feel like I'm a messenger to explain racism to older white people, which is okay, but this is not the main reason I chose this path. And so meaning if you use yourself for your own stories, if you aestheticize somehow and put together in a creative way stuff that also is very painful for yourself, I think you always have to be very aware that you do it in a way that does not hurt you again. And meaning the question, for example, if how to write about, let's say, racist violence without then in the writing reproducing it is a really, really tricky question to me. And so to do this music video, this is an approach where we can be very light and we can be a bit playful, and we can just film people that we find very beautiful and have a good time together. But this, I longed for this so much because I was, yeah, as I said in the book, it's rather I'm lonely and in it as I write it, and it's quite hard, and I have to confront myself with a lot of stuff, and so do later the readers. If they are able to read the book, I force this onto them. But for example, the first time I read in a space that were only Black people in it, I noticed the things I say here and the way that I use the words, I think I need to change some parts of it. Meaning I unconsciously, without knowing it again, there was in my head the idea of maybe a white audience. And so this, yeah, this is maybe, these things come to my mind when I see this music video, because with this music video, I did not have this audience anymore in the back of my head. As far as it is possible to have no audience in your head when you do something, but with this I felt like I could free myself again a bit from the self-chosen burden that I carry. Yes, and it was just wonderful to do it. Yeah, this is why I brought it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. And actually on the topic of, you know, humor and joy, there's a question in the Q&A. See, at the same time, like the novel is very playful and there are many humorous juxtapositions and moments in the novel. can you say a role about humor and the role it plays in your writing?
Yeah. Um, I was recently in Denmark where the novel was published, and this question came along, and then I just said, I think I'm a funny person, that's why it's in there, but that's too simple. That's too simple. No, I think it has something to do. It always comes to my mind, this song from Charlie Chaplin, when I get asked this question, and then how is it? Smile though your heart is aching, smile even though it's breaking, although a tear might be ever so near. Now, so this comes to my mind because, of course, sometimes when something's so fucked up and so terrible, the only way to deal with it is through humor. And I think that's what I do quite often in the book. And to me, there were some moments in the book where I was really, really laughing, and that was then really freeing. But through this, again, when you then go back and you have a passage where there's racism again, or sexism, or what, a scene that juggles with it, then it even goes more into your heart. No, then it really gets to you in a bad way if you had laughter before. So I really enjoy being funny sometimes, but I would not say that I actually know how to use it on a conscious level, because I really or in other words, quite often I talk about this book as if I would be the expert of my own process, which I am not. I'm the expert in doing it, but for me it's also a very weird job now that I have to put words onto it to describe why certain things happened in the way they did, because quite often I start intuitively, and I think there's also a magic in writing, that besides that it's a craft and that you have to train it, that I cannot explain. And I think the same goes for humor, but also it's a specific humor. I know people find it really funny. I had audiences who were really laughing and others who were just not. So it's but I find this question of humor very interesting. I was involved in a project recently, but then I could not do it because I had no time, where they really reviewed a lot of stand-up comedians, and they really were trying to really nail down what is humor, where does it come from, why do you laugh about especially these things and not these things, etc. And I found this very interesting. Maybe in 2 years I can go back to humor and studying humor.
Were the audiences in certain cities that laughed versus other ones, or what was I don't know, can you pin it down as to maybe why? I mean, no, okay.
I feel like sometimes it has to do with the spaces, and if it's a space where it's quite holy because it's an old Literaturhaus with a huge renommee, and everything is so in order in these places, and it has a long tradition, then sometimes the audience, I feel like, might not allow themselves to laugh, maybe. But this I don't know. No, I could never pin it down.
Okay. Okay, and there's another question in the chat here. I taught your novel from Mariana. I taught your novel last spring. My students were interested in the connection there to the US context. Your narrator comes to the US and discovers different sides of who she is. Can you speak to that? Thank you. I am enjoying the conversation. So that's kind of returning back to some of the things that you had mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
US connection. Students love the US connection. I mean, right?
Yes, I think the US connection is the reason that the novel gets published in the US, to be honest. So I think the narrator in this book is, or I start somewhere else. So the narrator is not me, but the narrator is a version of myself that I created and that is very near to myself. So I always try to bring in this analogy from a computer game that I programmed, and it orientates itself on my life and what happened and on people's stories around me. And the protagonist is kind of my avatar, that of course I say I navigate her through all of this, and but it's not me, but it's a version of me. And so, but what I say about the US now also goes for me. Therefore, I wanted to say this first. So as I came into the US in 2016, I really was, to my own surprise, confronted with the question what it means to be Black in Germany, because only throughout the distance you notice maybe things that from nearby you don't see so well, because also like the narrator in the book in the US, I noticed I get perceived differently. I get treated really nicely by a lot of Black people. There's a huge Black community. I mean, there is Black communities in Germany too, but I was never part of them. That's another story. So it was kind of a sort of a way of becoming Black in another way. And this is also one of the main topics in the book. What does it mean also later to be Black in Vietnam, for example, or in different parts of Germany, or in different times in the former GDR or later on. And then there's this part where the narrator notices how good she feels about this, the opportunity to be part of this community, the chance to that just she sees such a variety of Black people, even like she never has before. But she traveled to Angola in the book, but it seems like she does not want to talk about it in the book. So, and then at some point in the US or afterwards, when she's back, she realizes that this community is only so strong and so warm-hearted because it was necessary and because it's grown on all this pain throughout slavery, etc. And that that is not her story, that she was maybe rather a tourist in this Blackness that she so much enjoyed. And which doesn't mean that the experience is diminished by that, but it means that the experience is in some way an artificial experience. It's not her identity. So yeah, and now I said identity, it's mainly, the book is quite a lot about identity and who am I where. But when people ask me, is this a story about becoming Black mainly, then I try to say, no, this is a book about a person who really looks for her place in the world and where she feels safe and where she feels loved, and not even a place, of course, also emotionally, but also geographically. And this search is unfortunately always intertwined with the question of race and how people perceive race. She has no way around this. But the search is not who am I as a Black person, but rather where's my safe place.
In the end, that's what we're all looking for, right? Is a
Yes.
place to be ourselves. Okay, and let's see. So now in the chat, there's a question. Thank you so much for your book and the event. I love reading about your links to US writers and thinkers growing up in Germany. Were there German language literary classics that were important to you, whether in a positive or negative sense? So, for example, something to write against.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually always reminds me, because in your bio, every time I see it, it says Olivia Wenzel, born in Weimar, and I think about Weimar and the theater tradition and, so yeah, what literary classics are tops and flops from Olivia Wenzel?
Yeah, so I must be really honest here. I did not read so much in my life. I started reading again now, but I'm not the person who really knows a lot of books. I really enjoy movies. I enjoy watching series. But when I was younger in Weimar, it's the city where the old poet Goethe, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, spent a lot of time, and he wrote a lot of classics that were in the white canon that I had to read. And my teacher, she was very in love with all of his works. So I had to read all the Faust and all this stuff. And at some point I enjoyed it, but especially because of people, when I ask me, I come from Weimar. Yes, I really come from there because I really have read a lot of Goethe. And then later when I was in class in the finishing school, then we had a teacher who really loved Kafka. And this was very wonderful to me to share this stuff, because I really love the absurd things he does in his work, Franz Kafka. I think these are influences that I did not choose, but that happened. But I never felt like I have to write against something. It always happened naturally to me, and then I was lucky to meet the right people at the right time, so things were published. And yeah, no, to me, I sometimes wonder why there are not more collaborations in writing. I think I really want to read from some people who write something together. I think that's rather something. I write against myself writing alone. That might be the case. Yeah.
Okay. So no definitive favorite Goethe texts. You're not gonna.
No, Goethe is cool, but it's over. Another time. It makes no sense. No. I mean, in the German theater, they still have this canon. They still stage all these old texts, all this Shakespeare, all of this stuff. And of course, you can find in these texts, you can really pull out something and say this is has something to do with our time right now. But I quite often wonder why there's so much love for these old texts, because only old people love them. Which is, no, but it has nothing to do with the younger generations, or even with kids in schools. And yeah, and it has also something to do with a certain whiteness, I think.
Yeah. Let's see. So in the chat here, someone is asking about the video, your publicity video, you know, if that's available or going to be available to be taught together in class alongside the novel.
Ah, nice. No, you can see the video on YouTube when you type in 1000 Serpentinen Angst, it's there. But I don't think I know that in German schools, a lot of people work around the book now. Teachers put it in their curriculum quite often, but I don't think that they include the video or some ideas I have about images. No. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, it would be a shame not to include it because it is so rich and there's so much happening in the video, like you said too, with the eyes and the kind of like unsettling parts at the beginning and the color and the dancing. So, okay, does anyone have any other questions? Looks like there's, yeah, and Angelica, maybe I'll pass it to you if you have a few more questions.
Sure. Since we were just talking about the video, and the video also includes the automated snack machine, I'll come back to that motif. So it's actually also, it's how you introduce, it's how the how the novel opens, and you say, my heart is an I'm just translating from the German, but my heart is an automated snack machine. And this machine recurs throughout the novel. I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on that metaphor.
Mm-hmm. I will. First, I will read you quickly some scenes with the automat, so you get an impression, because I will not read the other text because we are out of time then, but I will read quickly something so people have an impression of it. and then I will try to explain it.
Thank you.
So maybe you can switch out your screens, then I will not be irritated. Sometimes I read and then I see people drinking. I'm like, that's weird. I mean, you, Jamel and Angelica, sorry. Thank you, see you in a bit. So I breathe deeply, open my eyes. I'm standing on a train platform in a small town, in my so-called hometown. Behind me, the snack machine. My eyes are burning. I look around me. I'm standing on the train platform with lots of people waiting for the train. 4 more minutes, my stomach growls. I think there are so many people here. 2 of them were a couple years ago. They haven't seen each other yet, standing 3 feet apart. If they run into each other on the train, one of them will be delighted and the other won't be. I switch which leg I favor and lean back against the snack machine. All of a sudden, I think of a pet turtle that a school friend had. When we were kids, we watched it often. Sometimes we would wrap it in string, tie it to a branch hanging in the water, and it would swim for hours in the same part of the lake without getting anywhere. I don't know exactly what kept me from just untying the string around its shell. I'm standing on the train platform with lots of people waiting for the train. 4 more minutes, my stomach growls. I think there are so many people here. Suddenly the loudspeaker crackles, but there's no announcement, no one speaks. The loudspeaker crackles again, then I hear wheezing. Somewhere in the area, someone is struggling audibly to breathe. The loud sound of someone gasping for air and breathing painstakingly in and out can be heard through the loudspeaker, echoing across the platform. It seems as if this person either forgot what they wanted to say or is trying not to say something evil that they've always wanted to say. 4 more minutes, my stomach growls. A giraffe with a too short tie stands next to me. It wants to get a snack. After inserting 2 coins in the machine, it notices, glancing into its wallet, that it doesn't have enough change. When I see it has several 50-euro bills in its briefcase, I decide not to give it the 20 cents. I'm sitting huddled in the snack machine. The glass is fudged. The air is muggy. By now, I'm completely wrapped in cellophane. Bits and pieces from a coconut chocolate bar are sticking to my hair and back, shit and urine to my feet. I use my middle finger to draw a turtle on the milky glass. Maybe one of the people on the train platform can see it from outside. A few people are standing on the platform and waiting for the train. 4 more minutes, their stomach growl. They think there are so many people here. Now I'm thinking of the turtle again from way back when at the lake. I wanted to know if it would eventually think of biting through the string on its own. That's why I didn't do anything and just observed it. But it never thought of that. In the meantime, its former owner, my classmate, suffers from ALS and can't move anymore. He's on a respirator and has been waiting to die for 2 years. He weighs only half of what he did back then. I can never bring myself to visit him. I'd rather stay here in the snack machine and make little animals out of cellophane, swans, tigers, turtles, pigeons, snakes, and hedgehogs. The animals probably have a lot to say to one another. I'm lying naked on the train tracks. Everyone is gone, I'm alone. It's quiet. Recently, someone crushed the snack machine like an oversized beer can. All of its contents, including me, spilled out onto the platform and the track bed, fizzling. My landing was hard. Since then, a trail of snacks, excrement, and little cellophane animals has run between my battered body and the battered machine. A funny collection, untidily spread out between the tracks like the entrails of a steamrolled pigeon. I'm alone on the tracks. It's quiet, everyone is gone. Grass shoots up between the tracks, the metal is rusted. A swan flies backwards past me. My gaze follows it until it's out of view. Slowly, I get up and walk step by step across the overgrown track bed. I walk along it, path overgrown with moss in some spots. There's something lying off in the distance, a mountain of plastic foil, a giant bundle. I get closer. Someone's under there, shrink wrapped in cellophane. I feel hot. My brother, my twin brother is lying there. He's 19 years old and dead. His eyes are glazed over. He's smiling at me through the transparent plastic film. I work up the courage to carefully go over to him. Hello, I whisper gently. His eyes are wide open. His milky pupils follow my movements. I say, come on, let's go into the sun. And I grab him inside the plastic film and stick him under my arm. Groaning, I drag him, rustling and crinkling, a few paces away from the track bed, away from the platform, back behind the tracks into a meadow. From here, we have a decent view of everything. My brother is lying there all twisted. I sit down next to him. As I rip open the cellophane around his head, the leaves and the trees rustle in the wind. What am I doing here? I don't know the answer to this question. It's quiet. So these were the snacks. This is a longer episode with the vending snack machine in the book. And you have it very much. You can come back now to me, please. Sorry. Hi. And you have it in the beginning of the book, and then in the middle it's coming back. And to me, this machine is different things. It's a place of shelter for the narrator, for her imagination, but also now I've read the part where the brother is somehow related to this machine. It's a place where there's no time, or time moves backwards or in other ways that we know is, and so it's kind of an island of quietness, especially because in the book everything is so always high volume, and that these parts, when it's getting a bit surreal, I could really relax as I was writing them, and I think that might translate to the people who read it. But there's also this weird notion that always comes in a book that has something to do with capitalism, that how we consume so much shit we don't need, and there are a lot of sentences in the book that link capitalism to racism, and I think it has something to do with this too, but it's not explicit. But I think this is how it came to be, or why it came to me. And then there's also I forgot the third notion, but there is one. That it's kind of like the framework, how this novel is working. When you start reading this vending machine thing, it says like nothing here is in order. You can choose whatever snack you want, and then see how you can swallow it. Feel free, and some things might not be so tasty. And this is kind of a very like the how to read this book. There's a lot of things, and you choose whatever you take from it and what not. And there's not a typical order in these things or ranking, because it's again, you choose what you take in and what you don't take in. So I think it's a mix of these things, but mainly it's something that I just find very beautiful when I stand on train platforms. I really like it.
Yeah, thank you both for reading that segment aloud to us, and also for the elaboration on its multivalent meaning, its connotations. It's really quite rich. I've been thinking about it as well while reading throughout the book, and always sort of kind of just, it's like a little puzzle where I keep kind of trying to figure out how it fits together, and you can take it in so many different directions. What struck me also, also in the way that you just presented this, is it seems to be that the snack machine is both subject and object. In other words, it's this entity that spits out the commodities that people want. So it's kind of an agent, as it were. And at the same time, you also identify with these snacks themselves that kind of get, they get cast off or thrown away, or they're partly eaten. And that there is a kind of oscillation between these two poles of object and subject through the snack machine, and the way that that ties in also with, consumption, consumer culture, the idea of immediate gratification, of convenience, of impulse purchases, of this machine that's available to all strangers, to anyone who comes along. And the way, by extension, this also relates to media culture, which is something we're all consuming. And at the same time, that culture, the media, is also consuming us, because it harvests our attention for algorithms, so that the subject is continually unsettled and sort of transferred in both directions. I don't know if I'm going too far with this, but
No, it's good. It's good. I have nothing to add, though.
Sorry. But clearly I'm triggering a lot of thought.
I find it very interesting.
So as we bring today's event to a close, I'd like to again express my sincere appreciation to Olivia, Jamel, and Angelica, and importantly, for the University of Toronto and the Waterloo Center for German Studies for making this wonderful conversation possible. Today's recording will soon be among the others in the All Black Lives Matter series playlist on our YouTube channel. Please mark your calendars for February 17th to the 20th, 2022, when the 5th BGHRA conference will be hosted virtually in collaboration with Africana Studies at Rutgers University, Camden. The conference will not only be in honor of Black History Month, but also celebrates the 10th anniversary of the BGHRA. Our theme is All Black Lives Matter, Black Germany and Beyond, and registration is now open at tinyurl.com/BGHRA 2022. Stop by our website at bghra.org for all the details about what promises to be a fabulous and inspirational series of events over 4 glorious days. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and YouTube channel, and to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Finally, we hope that you've enjoyed today's discussion as much as we have. And until next time, we thank you again for your time and attention.
Farewell, my friends.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. It was really nice.